So yes, you've been doing this meditation challenge and going through the different how can I say almost movements of meditation, perhaps we could call them, that make up a kind of if you like, a system of spiritual practice that we practice within our spiritual community. So I think you've done the meditations to do with mindfulness and gathering together, the integrating aspect of meditation, which is so important. Just gathering our disparate energies, if you like, together. It's very hard, I think, to make any progress if you can't gather yourself together into some sort of integrated whole. The word mindfulness is used a lot these days, and everybody seems to think they know what it means. But it's worth remembering that its primary meaning in Buddhist tradition is memory and recollection. Recollection, which is a lovely word. What you're doing in meditation is recollecting yourself, or collecting yourself, gathering yourself. You're trying to bring coherence to your consciousness, to your body, speech and mind. Not just when you're sitting on the cushion doing that meditation on the breath, the mindfulness of breathing, but in your life generally. You're trying to bring a much greater continuity of purpose into all the areas of your life. Very, very difficult to, even have a sort of happy life or fulfilled life if we're very split, and if we're broken up over many different activities. And of course, with the pressures of modern life in the city, it's not easy to do that. That's why you have to work quite hard, I think, in mindfulness practice to gather yourself together. So that's in a sense the first sort of requirement of movement in meditation, sort of making more of a sort of coherent sense of yourself, and yes, this continuity of purpose in your day-to-day activities, because a lot of practice of meditation takes place off of the cushion. You might meditate if you're lucky, maybe 40 minutes a day. Maybe you meditate twice a day. But for the rest of the day, you've got to try and bring what you've been doing in the meditation into your life. So finding that continuity of purpose through mindfulness, particularly. This is often said in Buddhist tradition. When you're working on a particular meditation, you have to recollect that what you're doing in meditation in your day. Is why I think in relation to mindfulness, it's very important to introduce into your day pauses, empty spaces. Pauses and empty spaces. I think Mozart said they're the most important bits in a piece of music. It's the spaces that bring coherence to the work. So, when you're at work, when you're at home, find time. It doesn't have to be very long, where there is just a space where you can take some breaths, you can come back to your body, you can refresh awareness, refresh your energy, refresh your mind. The more you do that, the better. These days with technology, the temptation is to do that, isn't it? With that thing that's often glued to our hands, the phone. But try to resist that. Create pauses and empty spaces where you recollect mindfulness, and gather yourself together. Make yourself more coherent in your life. And then the other great movement of meditation is more expansive. This is particularly associated with the meditation of loving kindness, where we're making to become, to use the literal translation of bhavana, making loving kindness to become, bringing love into being, especially this friendly love, this non-sticky, non-attached love, this love which is for everybody. That's a direction. It's not going to come overnight. But you're looking particularly here to develop. How can you call it? Well, one expression is developing positive emotion. Unfortunately, it's a slightly ugly term, and I think it can be misunderstood. But it's more like you're developing a rich emotional life. That's perhaps a better way of describing it. Made up of a rich array of emotions. There's that friendliness, which is the primary emotion, this very friendly response to whoever you meet, whoever they are, overcoming ill will and resentments towards people, not, if you like, contracting, which often goes with ill will and resentment, but becoming expansive, reaching out, dissolving difference, and having a genuine sense of the well-being of others. Metta, loving kindness, is sometimes described as a feeling, but it's not. It's an act. It's an action. It's a strong volition that you're trying to develop of wishing people well. And with that, this rich array of emotions. Out of loving kindness also comes compassion. When you encounter the suffering of another, you want to act to alleviate that suffering. It's not pity, it's not sentimentality. Again, it's an action of wanting to respond practically for others. And then there's joy, or sympathetic joy. You feel joy at others' happiness and well-being and success. You wish them well. And then there's equanimity, this great sense of peace and calm and evenness, because your love, your compassion, your joy is felt evenly to everybody. Sometimes equanimity can be misunderstood as a sort of detachment and even a sort of indifference, but it's not that. It's more like a deep peace, a very, very deep peace, which arises when your emotional response to others is as it should be. There's a great sense of deep satisfaction with that you're responding as one should to what is arising around you. So these are the sort of rich array of emotions that you can develop within this next movement of meditation. You've done sort of spiritual death things.
Yeah, letting go, we called it.
Letting go.
Breaking through.
Breaking through. Well, that's very good, isn't it? Because actually what will happen if you have those movements of meditation, gathering together, cultivating this boundless emotion, you will let go, you will break down. Actually, that's what starts to happen. I mean, I was saying last night to the study group I was leading that I think there ought to be a health warning with meditation from the beginning, because whether you like it or not, sorry, this sounds a bit threatening, doesn't it? When you take up meditation practice, things start to change. And that change isn't always convenient. It can be very sort of inconvenient. And God, do tell me if I'm saying the wrong thing, Maitri, because I am out in practice. But no, it does happen. You will start to change. You'll start to notice that things will start to sort of slip away. Things that you used to be engaged with, they start to just drop away. You can't do the things that you used to do. Your habits start to change. Your unconscious habits start to get challenged. Where it can get inconvenient is that maybe your friends or even your family sort of would rather you went back to how you were before you took up meditation. This, even though you're much happier and more positive and all the rest of it, And rather, they sort of don't like that because, well, you've changed. You're just different now. And I think this is where the sort of letting go comes in. You have to be open to letting go of, as it were, your old self. There needs to be a kind of openness to that. It's not something you should force. It's not something you should do out of an idea. But you just start to notice through becoming more aware, more vividly aware, more friendly. You can't do the same old stuff. You can't kind of do that. You don't have those kind of reactions anymore. So there's got to be changes, and it's really good to cooperate with that, to allow yourself to open to that. Sometimes that can be quite frightening. It is worth pointing out that as you go deeper into meditation, you can start coming across moments of quite a deep fear as you sort of edge out of your comfort zone. One meditation master describes, that you can resist what he calls the wild space of awareness. A wonderful expression, I think. The wild space of awareness. If you're developing mindfulness, if you're becoming more together, if you're developing that loving kindness, there's a kind of boundlessness that starts to open up. That actually doesn't have any limit. And sometimes in meditation you have that sense, hang on, where's the end of this? Where's the boundary? And you start to sense there isn't one. That actually unfoldment is just going to go on. And that can be quite frightening to our present self. So sometimes in meditation you can start to edge up against a kind of fear. Our teacher, Sangharakshita, said that he's described this as the touch of reality. Is, if you like, reality is sort of breathing on your neck a little bit. And it's a little bit threatening because reality itself is completely boundless. In reality, there isn't a distinction, for example, between self and other. That vanishes, that isn't there. And when we edge towards that, it's so foreign, so weird, so strange, so wild, that it can be a bit scary. The other side of that is exhilaration. You might have noticed that already if you've got a bit more concentrated in meditation. As you come onto the edge of that, suddenly there's this. It's exhilarating. Hey, what's going to happen? What's opening up here? It's very important not to grasp onto that, because as soon as you start thinking, oh, it's happening, it will just dissolve. As soon as you bring that mind in. But you somehow have to stay with that point where things are opening without fear, without any kind of grasping, and allow it to unfold and open. Yes, let go into that wild space of awareness. Let that strangeness and that mystery be there. Sometimes I think meditation is over-taught. You can have an unconscious, I'm talking a lot, even talked a lot in that little lead through. It's really important for there not to be too many words. Just enough to focus your mind, just enough to develop that loving kindness, and then allow yourself to enter the mystery, open up to the mystery, and be curious about what might arise. So this is the receptive aspect, I think, of meditation, which isn't passivity. It's this alert receptiveness for what might arise, being curious about that, open to that. What time are we having a tea break?
20 past.
Okay, 20 past. I've got a bit longer then in this session. Now then, there's another aspect of meditation. So you've had integration, positive emotion, letting go, which is kind of like a spiritual death. So then there's another movement of meditation, which is perhaps the hardest to talk about. And it's a kind of opening up to a quite different dimension of things. I mentioned that sequence of positive emotions: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. But there's another couple, or three, with all their different shades, that also gets added on, which are very hard to talk about, but I'll have a go. And these are faith, devotion, and reverence. Faith, devotion, and reverence. What happens when your love, when your positive emotion, when your goodwill encounters something or somebody greater than yourself? What happens when it encounters a vivid, if you like, spiritual principle or ideal, or even a person? What does it do? Well, of course, it remains friendly, but it turns into these emotions which are the encounter with that higher dimension. So, like I say, it's hard to describe these emotions because we have particular associations with them in the English language. So let me just pick out two of them: faith and reverence, which are really, really crucial emotions in Buddhism. So reverence is a working translation of the Pali word Gaurava in Sanskrit for the Indic scholars among you. And this emotion comes from a root meaning that which is heavy, that which is weighty, with quality, with a higher quality. It has a kind of weight for you. You know, if you've ever met anybody in your life, or you've ever, encountered something in your life, you think, that person or that thing, it's so weighty. All I want to do is sort of incline my head, or even if you're of a particular temperament, to prostrate. You just have that instinctive respect or reverence. It's not being forced on you. Nobody's telling you to be like that. It's just you as an individual, as a person, in all your positive humanity. You recognize that person or that thing or that ideal or that principle is somehow worthy of a different kind of emotion. It's a bit like the encounter with something sublime, something profound. It deeply moves you. So that quality is regarded as very, very important for, in a way, higher stages of meditation, because you're opening to that which is beyond the known, the embodiment of what's beyond the known. And the other word, faith, is a working translation of the word Shraddha in Sanskrit, which comes from a root meaning to place the heart upon. To place the heart upon something higher. There's something deep in you that longs to discover something greater. And you see it. You come across it. There's a great resonance in you in relation to that. It sort of goes out from you and sees that in that principle, in that ideal, even in that embodiment in that person. It sort of objectifies it to you, but it has a strong emotional charge. It may be experienced as a tremendous longing. Maitrinara talked about how I got involved the first time I came along. Well, actually, the first thing that really grabbed hold of me was a Buddhist devotional ritual, what's called a puja. And I sort of knew by the end of that ritual, which involved mantra chanting and things like that I was Buddhist, and I would devote my life to Buddhism. It was as if a kind of longing in me that was searching for something greater than myself that I could really serve had been found. It wasn't sort of explained to me, it wasn't worked out, it was just there. All the explanations came later, the working out came later. but that strong emotional response. There's something from the Platonic, the Western tradition. There's a lovely phrase which goes something like, the eye can only see the sun of reality, because there's something of the sun in the eye. There is something in us that longs for something greater, something, as it were, transcendent, something profound, sublime. We long, as it were, for that to be in our lives. Well, that's this other set of emotions: faith, reverence, even a kind of devotion. And this, in Buddhist tradition generally, is embodied in the figure of the Buddha. This is why we have the Buddha image. The way Buddhists relate to enlightenment, the highest spiritual ideal of wisdom and compassion and all the rest of it, is in the figure of the Buddha. The Buddha is said to be the sort of living embodiment of that. And the Buddha image is to remind us of that dimension of things. And he becomes an object of meditation. An object of meditation. It's perhaps a rather strange way of thinking, but if you think about it, why is it that Buddhists wanted to see enlightenment in the form of the person who gained enlightenment? Why did that happen? Some, people say, Buddhists fell away from the sort of pristine ideal and they deified the Buddha and so on and so forth. That's not what's really going on. If you think about it, the most important category, the highest category that we have, is personhood. If you think about it. I mean, as persons, we are extremely important to ourselves. We're kind of sacred to ourselves, aren't we? I mean, I know people don't like themselves and all that have all sort of body issues, but come on, we are supremely important to ourselves as people. That's our highest category. That's as it should be. And other people are very important to us as well. That's what drives and gets our emotions going, really, isn't it? It's not abstract ideas, important though they might be. It's not concepts. It's people. It's ourselves as a person in relation to other people. So the most natural thing to depict enlightenment is to depict enlightenment as the enlightened person. And so there's many Buddhist practices where you bring to mind the Buddha. You imagine the enlightened person. You imagine all the qualities of enlightenment before you or in your heart. And you meditate on that. You meditate on that to bring those qualities more alive within your life, within your consciousness. And this is sometimes called, in meditation, the stage of spiritual rebirth, where you're imagining and trying to bring alive the living spirit of enlightenment in your life, in the form of visualization, in the form of recitation. And what I want to do at the end of this evening is do a little bit of that, introduce a little bit of that if you want to join in with that. So this is a Buddhist centre. This is run by the Brixton Buddhist community. So we've been meditating, we've been practicing, you've been doing the meditation challenge, but that's all happening within the context of, it's coming out of the Buddhist tradition. You don't have to be a Buddhist to do the meditations that we've been doing, but they do ultimately emanate from the Buddha, the enlightened one. They go back 2,500 years, the meditation practices, the mindfulness of breathing, the development of loving kindness were teachings, were meditations that the Buddha taught and that his disciples taught. And the Buddha taught them from out of his attainment, through his own efforts, of a completely perfect awareness, an undimmed awareness, an awareness that never left him, constantly, naturally mindful and self-aware and present. At the end of his life, when he was very sick, when he was walking from place to place and in a great deal of pain, he said that he was never, the only time he wasn't in pain was when he was absorbed deeply in meditation. But while walking around on his last tour, going to people out of compassion to bring Buddhism to them if they wanted it, up in obscure parts of northern India, he said he was in constant pain. He said, I'm an 80-year-old man now. I'm like an old cart that goes along through being held together with bits of rope. So in other words, he's just holding himself together, his physical body, but he's in a lot of pain, a lot of back pain, a lot of dysentery, all those sorts of illnesses. But he says, my mindfulness is undimmed. My mindfulness is not affected. Not just my awareness, but my purpose. And his purpose was a loving purpose. To go to different people, wanderers like himself who'd renounced the world, ordinary men and women, householders, whoever they were. And right up until the end, until his last breath, he was communicating the Dharma to people. Right to the end. And then he entered what's called parinirvana, a deeply mysterious state which can't be defined. Complete liberation is perhaps all we can say. And it's very interesting to see the responses of everybody after the parinirvana. Apparently his enlightened disciples were unaffected. They weren't upset because for them enlightenment hadn't gone out of the world. They're enlightened, that's ever present. So it's not associated with the personality of the Buddha. But everybody else, people perhaps like ourselves, were very, very deeply upset and moved. They said the light has gone out of the world. Their connection with the state of enlightenment had gone. The Buddha had affected them so strongly, and there's a very touching moment just before the Buddha passes away when his closest disciple, his attendant Ananda, is weeping. He's so upset. He's been with him through all sorts of situations, and he says, the master is about to pass away. My teacher, my spiritual friend is about to pass away. I have so much to do, so much to develop. My master, he who is so kind. He who is so kind. Our own teacher says all of Buddhism is in that phrase. He who is so kind, constantly kind, a wise kindness, a wise compassion, a wise love. So of course, after the Buddha, as it were, disappears, he's very, very strongly in people's memories. He's very, very strongly in their memory. The way they remember enlightenment is by remembering him. Of course it is. It's this wonderful thing, isn't it, memory? I know we can remember horrible things, but I think memory is actually one of those fabulous things where we can remember really good things that we've done, really good things that have happened to us, that we can feel uplifted by. It plays a very, very important part in human life. So for a lot of Buddhists, early Buddhists, remembering the Buddha, it became a spiritual practice. It became a way of bringing enlightenment back to life in their lives. It wasn't deifying the Buddha. It wasn't sort of turning the Buddha into a god. It was a way of bringing to life in them what their life was really all about. There's an incredibly moving story about, again, this figure, Ananda, this person, Ananda, who was so important in early Buddhism, where after the Buddha has passed, he goes back to the place where the Buddha spent 20 years in rainy season retreat. He goes back to the very place where he used to stay, a kind of cottage called the Gandakuti. which means the perfumed chamber. It's called the perfume chamber because people would bring flowers to adorn it, even when the Buddha was there. The ordinary people, that was the way they wanted to show their respect. They'd adorn it with flowers. So this lovely building, the perfume chamber, just very small, very modest. And Ananda goes in and he sweeps the floor. He changes the water into fresh water. He sits in this place as if the Buddha is present, as if there's something of the Buddha still in this place where he was. Some later commentators said because he was too attached. They're a bit stern, a bit hardline. But of course, it's not attachment in a sort of neurotic sense. It's the natural way you want to honour your spiritual friend, your teacher. It's perfectly natural to want to do that. And in so doing, keep alive your ideals before you, in the memory of that person. This is the origin of the Buddha image. This is where it all comes from. It comes from the very deep human, if you like, need to remember who we revere. We revere them because of their qualities, because of their wisdom, because of their kindness. And down the centuries, and it still goes on to this day, this is a way of meditating. A way of meditating on enlightenment through imagining the Buddha. And this is why we have flowers. This goes back to, the very natural, very Indian way actually of adorning that which those you revere and love and appreciate, even just in ordinary human life, is in India you have garlands and lots of loose flower offerings. I lived in India for many years, and it was part of the culture that I loved more than anything. The flower offerings that happen. But this is why we adorn our shrine with flowers. We're following an old Buddhist custom. But of course, there's a kind of teaching that is brought to this, because flowers are so lovely, and these are so pretty. Whoever bought these flowers, they've really got an eye, haven't they? But they fade. So no matter how beautiful something is, it arises and it passes. So even in the offering, there's a reminder of reality, a reminder of what's going to happen to us and our loved ones. We live in whatever way we live, but we will all pass. So it's an adornment, it's an offering, but it's a reminder of impermanence. And then there are the candles, the lights. And the lights symbolise that the light of wisdom. Again, a very, very natural way around the Buddha. You often find the Buddha sitting all night teaching the Dharma to people in a hall or something like that, and it's just lit by single lamps around the room. Just really communicating to the people. But so the lights play a very important part in the life of early Buddhists, but they become a symbol. This symbolises the light of wisdom. The light of wisdom that we need to light within our own heart. So the flowers symbolise impermanence, but then we can kindle the light of wisdom within our own heart. So that's why we have the lights. And then there's incense. There's none burning at the moment, but the Buddha, it's clear from some of the teachings he gives, loved sweet fragrances, sandalwood, aromatic resin, blue lotus, jasmine, Indian flowers, having lived there, night scented jasmine is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's the most gorgeous fragrance you can possibly imagine. Very, very subtle, enchanting, transporting. But this fragrance is wonderful, but the real fragrance, is the fragrance of virtue, the fragrance of living a life of virtue, and that pervades the atmosphere. That's what we're trying to do through our meditation, through our life. We're trying to create something which is like a very sweet and very enchanting perfume that is pervading our society. And perfume is mysterious, isn't it? You sometimes get a scent wafting over it. Where does that come from? It doesn't have to sort of, if it's a really good perfume, you're not quite sure where it's emanating from. And it's transporting, but it's kind of mysterious. Well, you can be a bit like that. You don't have to announce your Buddhism or your meditation challenge all around you. It will just emanate from you like a wonderful perfume. And you sort of hear stories about this, don't you? That, somebody comes up to somebody who's been meditating for a while and say, "You look different. What's happened? What are you on? You're on something." And then you tell them it's meditation. Thought it was something. That's like the fragrance of virtue. So these become offerings that we make to the Buddha. So what I want us to do, for a little while before we wind up, is a bit of meditation on the Buddha, but not just imagining the Buddha. What also accompanies this is sound. In Buddhism, they developed a tradition of mantra chanting. Mantra can mean a tool for focusing the mind. It can also mean that which protects the mind, because if you've got a mantra going on in your mind, you haven't got other things going on in your mind. And if the mantra is associated, it's always associated with an image of enlightenment, then you've got enlightenment in your mind. So you're using, in a sense, two senses: the visual sense, or the visual sense in the sense of the imagination, and you're using the sound sense to gather yourself together, to focus on what is profound and what is meaningful. So what we're going to do, I want you to sit in meditation again. And I'm going to just say a few words about how, when you're meditating, about the Buddha to mind. And then I'm going to start the mantra of the Buddha, which is a set of syllables, which does have a sort of meaning, but it's more a sound. So it will be Om, which symbolises the spiritual ideal, and then it will be Muni, which means the silent sage, twice, and then Mahamuni, the greatly silent sage, which is the name of the Buddha. Shakyamuni, which is the greatly, the greatly fierce sage in some ways, if you can imagine such a thing. Shakya is the name of his clan. Swaha, may it be so. And the whole idea here is that there's all sorts of ways I can explain this, but we're pervading our entire body, speech and mind with the qualities of enlightenment. That's what we're going to do. We're opening up to quite a different dimension. And you can join in with the mantra, and when that's got going, you can come forward, and if you wish, you can offer a tea light, a night light there, and imagine that you're lighting the lamp of wisdom in your heart. Maybe even you could make a little aspiration, as this is the last night, to really stay in touch with what has been good on this course. And to take it further. Really, you just form a little aspiration in your mind, not to lose this, not to lose what you've benefited from, to keep that light shining. So a little bit of ritual, if you wish. So just settle, come right into the presence. And imagine a different scene. We're seated on a grassy plain. Sprinkled with beautiful flowers, brightly coloured flowers in all directions, under a great sky. And rising up in front of us is a great tree with a silver trunk and deep green, glossy, heart-shaped leaves flickering a little bit in the breeze. This is the Bodhi tree, the tree of enlightenment. If you can't see anything, it doesn't matter, just feel it. Just feel you're in this very lovely space. And in front of the tree is a pile of very long grass stems, deep green, arranged as a kind of cushion. In front of the tree and on top of the cushion is a white square of cloth, brilliant, pure white. And seated on that cushion of grass, on the white cloth, is the Buddha. Just let him take whatever form he takes. You might see him seated, cross-legged, in meditation, his hands resting on his lap, in deep yellow robes, glowing skin, an aura of light around him. Eyes are slightly open. With a very slight smile. Above all, feel that you're in the presence of a great field, a great realm of mindfulness and awareness, of loving kindness, deep silence and peace. And as you sit there in the presence of the Buddha, you begin to hear the sound of his mantra resounding, and you may well join in with this sound. Om Mani Mani Maha Mani Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni